The Game Schooler Podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. In this week's episode, we'll cover Gamehole Con in Madison, Wisconsin. Welcome to the Game Schooler Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Kotecki, along with my co-host, Dr. Michael McCabe. How's it going, Michael?
How you doing, Doug? 100 hours straight of board games for me?
For you, yes.
So I'm good, but if people hear papers rustling, it's because I don't have all my plays logged, so I'm looking at notes. I'll try to be succinct and to the point. I'm a little fried after day 4 of the convention, though.
Yeah, so we this past weekend was Gamehole Con in Madison, Wisconsin. Michael was there all 4 days, almost, all day, every day, all 4 days. I made it over Friday night and Saturday. So Michael's got more stories to tell you about, but let's talk a little bit just, I guess, about the general, what Gamehole Con is and, what kind of experience it is.
Well, let's talk about it. And for context, we're talking about it from the board gaming tabletop perspective. Anytime you get in the hobby, there's all different types of events and things to do there. So Gamehole Con is a regional convention, upwards of 10,000 participants throughout the week. I don't know how they count that. I have no idea how any conventions count the people that are in there, but it takes place in Madison, Wisconsin, a place called the Alliant Energy Center. That's where it's been the last several years. And what's awesome about that location, you're 2 miles from the Capitol and downtown Madison. You're 2 miles away from some suburbs where you can just go and eat. You're right next to a Starbucks and a barbecue place. So it's really easy access to get in and out. Yeah. And the free parking is absolutely awesome as well, to just, if you can get a spot within 2 miles of the place.
Yeah. And and in comparison, it's like I was trying to think on a way that I could describe it without sounding rude or insensitive, but in the scale of things, this, like, in comparison to Gen Con, this feels like a half-empty mall in a good way, right? Like, Gen Con is so insane. This is very relaxed, and you're not running into and bumping into people constantly, and it's like very chill, right? Or am I having a different experience?
I don't know.
Like, to me, the hustle and bustle is not there.
Oh, not at all. And that's, Gen Con is the best 4 days in gaming, of course. But for me, Gamehole Con is my 4 favorite days out of the year, because you're able to just play and get to a table, get out of a table, take breaks. You don't have to plan. It's kind of like when you hear people who who live in major cities, Los Angeles, New York, you have to plan your day around traffic, right? Yeah. And I feel like at Gen Con, you have to do that. Gamehole Con, no, you just go play.
Yeah. And to maybe button up my analogy, it would be the equivalent of Gen Con is like the day is Black Friday at a mall, and Gamehole Con is a Wednesday night in a mall, not during holiday shopping season.
It sounds like you used to work in a mall and have some experience there.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, you were an assistant manager, right? You had the keys and everything. They trusted you.
Yeah, I was like 14.
Look at you running it. Yeah, and what is another part of the convention, though, all different parts of the hobby are there in your own little space. So you've got an escape room, you've got a true dungeon, you've got a ton of Dungeons and Dragons, and this year was big because they were celebrating their 50th anniversary. You have other RPG systems. Monte Cook Games has a gigantic presence there. So all of those pieces are, outside of our show and what we talk about, but they're there. And then there's board gaming happening in a nice little library. And then there's an open gaming area where the lighting would it could be benefited from a little bit of studio lighting there, but it's down a hallway next to where people with fuzzy swords are beating each other up. And then there are rooms, think conference rooms, where you can go into, you're paying $2 an hour, sitting down and playing games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is very similar to Gen Con is there were segments of the hobby that you and I didn't even run into. You're like, where are the Magic players? They're there, but they have their
own convention within Gamehole Con.
They're all in different areas and nooks and crannies. So you just you see who you're by, but as far as other hobby adjacent things, sometimes you can go the whole convention without bumping into them. I know this is a convention that you really enjoy, and I may be speaking for you, but primarily because you get to play a lot of the games that you don't get to play on a regular basis. Your
any other time
games
of the year.
and heavier games that you just don't have the people for.
Don't have the people, don't have the time, don't have the energy, and some of them I teach, and then some of them I'll throw down the $2 an hour, sit down and play, and then there's the serendipitous moments of discovery. In each of so this is my third year in a row of going. In each of the years, there's been a game that I had no idea I would get a chance to play or replay, and I'm playing it and meeting new people or playing with some of my best friends and just having that experience that makes gaming awesome. We had one of those last night. I don't know, maybe we should just jump into it right now and talk about what happened at the library and just go through there. They have a game library with several hundred titles, probably approaching 1,000 titles, if not more than that. Yeah. And Doug and I were in there at about, it was approaching the 10 p.m. hour, and I think we needed to be out around midnight. But sometime in the mid-9 o'clock, it was convention time. And we're looking at all these titles, and we're getting suggestions from the wonderful people from over in the Milwaukee area. We're like, no, we're looking. Yeah. And Doug goes, ooh, what about Tobago? I have that in my collection. Yeah, let's try it.
Yeah, because you're looking at stuff and trying to find things that you either can get up kind of running up and fast. Like, you're not going to just grab something completely random off the shelf at 10 o'clock at night and be like, let's dive into this game and see what unfolds, So he's kind of scanning through that stuff.
And we sat down and played Tobago, and I think this will be a game of the week at some point. I just had a blast. 2009, Bruce Allen, and these stats are off the top of my head, so I could be wrong. But a really, really cool game. It was my first time ever playing it. I've noticed it on your Calyx for the last 5 to 6 years, but hadn't played it before. So that was kind of my moment. And then I had 2 more of those moments today, but that was my moment of playing with friends, where it's just like, oh, this is awesome, man. This is why I'm in the hobby, so to speak, to be able to have moments like this. And folks, I thought that I got the win. I played that game very well, especially for the first time. This is a theme that you'll hear throughout this show. I got absolutely demolished the last 4 days, and I'm okay with that because I got to play a lot of games and replay a lot of games. Doug beat me 66-50 for those keeping score at home, but it didn't feel like that. I don't know if you want to talk about the game or just give a brief gist or where we're going here, but that was a cool moment that I just wanted to share.
Yeah, it's a really, I think that's one of the awesome things about conventions in general, and certainly playing conventions, is when you can go back and revisit stuff that you've enjoyed and liked in your past, and be like reminded of why you liked it. And sometimes for whatever reason things sit on the shelf and you're like, I should play that again sometime, and it isn't until you pull it back out again a couple years later and you're like, this is really good, and this is why I kept it. And in Tobago there's an island with various hexagons that are different terrain types, and there are 4 treasures that are on the island, but the players are basically winnowing down where the treasures are. So, for example, it might say it's in the biggest mountain range. Okay, well, then you put all the cubes for that treasure in the mountain range. And then Michael could play a card and says, but it's not next to a tree. And so then more of them get eliminated until there's only one left. At that point, then the race is on to collect that treasure with your ATV. And once you do, it's a really cool mechanism because everybody that contributed cards to the location of that treasure is going to be in on acquiring treasure. And there's this cool hidden mechanism where you get to see some of the treasure cards that are going to be available, and Michael will get to see some. And then we shuffle them all together with the third one or another card that nobody knows. And then based on the order that people put clues or discovered the treasure, you flip over a treasure card, and it's like, there's 2 treasure on this. Would you like it? No. And you pass, and it kind of disappears. And you're thinking in the back of your head, it's like, I know I saw a 6, so I'm going to wait for that. But you also, if everybody just keeps passing, not everybody's going to get a treasure. So it's a really, I believe they call it an induction game. It's not a deduction game. You're doing the reverse of that.
Convection oven?
Yes, a convection oven game. But really cool, and it's just amazing how good some of those games are from 10 to 15 years ago.
Well, and it worked. Offline, you and I have been talking about, man, some of these games feel like they've had the fun developed out of them.
Yeah.
And that one, it just worked. It was fun. Wasn't mean, but it was competitive. That was fun. That was a good one.
Some good randomness and things like that, moments of excitement and trying to out-bluff each other and things like that. So really cool game.
Yeah, and then I think, you mind if I just talk about a rondelle in 2 games, and then we can go through
it?
All right. So, folks, I got to play 2 games that have a really nice rondelle. Doug, do you want to give us a Kotechian game schoolerified definition of a rondelle, or should I do my best here?
Do what you can.
So a rondelle is a track on the game board. That essentially, it's something that's in the middle of the board that you're going to be moving around, oftentimes moving around more than once throughout the game. And so the game that I played today that had a rondelle was Metro Runner, designed by Stephen Kerr, and it was all the way... We interviewed Stephen back in episode 174. We were very fortunate to get to talk to him about it as a first-time designer, and he's publishing it. He published it under Thunderworks. We saw it at Gen Con out on the table, and there was some crowded people at Gen Con. I wasn't able to get it, and I wanted to see it on the table. It was, and I wanted to figure out, what's this game about? We interviewed him, but I want to see it. And so I got to play it today, and he taught it, and it's the only time I went to my wallet all 4 days, other than for overpriced ice cream for my child. But, and so I came home with Metro Runner. It's one that I have a nephew that I think is going to love it. And I hope we get it played to the game group here sooner rather than later while the rules are fresh. But it's set in just a quick gist because it could be a spotlight game as well. But it's set in a not too distant New York, and you're a hacker. So you're moving around these different regions of New York, and you are hiring, getting hired to do jobs as a hacker. And once you get hired to do a job, you move up on one track. And then once you successfully hack, you move up on another track. And you're kind of collecting these cubes to do a little bit of set collection to make those job contracts get fulfilled. What worked for me with it were the choices were just awesome. And they were quick. It had that Emerson Matsauchi type of the fast turns. What do you mean it's my turn again? I just got done fulfilling that contract and figure out what the heck I just did, and it's all of a sudden my turn. And it was another example, Doug, where about 3 turns I was like, oh, I'm going to get smoked here. This guy I'm playing against, he might actually be a computer science hacker. Yeah. So I'm just going to figure out what the game's about and ask some questions and have a good time. Game. Yeah, but that was... It was good, and I'm glad I brought that one home. I can think of a few different people that I'd like to play it with. You're one of them, and kind of see where it fits. But Thunderworks is doing a nice job, and they really have a presence at this convention. Obviously, people will know that we're both fans of a lot of their games, and they've been featured on Games of the Week. But that was a really nice game to kind of almost finish the day with today. So that's where I started my day. Just one other one here, and I'll be quick on this one, but I got Icky played. Another rondelle game where you're going around Tokyo in a much earlier era, and you're visiting all these different market shops, and you're triggering off all these combos. And as you visit somebody else's shop, it's going to move them up in experience. It's a game that I got at Gen Con 2023 with an expansion, and it's the first time I actually got it to the table with the expansion, and I was really excited. But Doug, I had one of those terrifying moments. I know you know this, but I'm going to tell you for a second time.
I'll sound surprised.
Thank you. So I was solid on the base game, like solid, good. And the game was set to start at I think it was 11. So I tried to sleep in a little bit because it was the second day of the con, and I was teaching it, right? And then when I got the rules out with my first cup of coffee, I immediately got in my car and sped over to the convention center. And I was like, the expansion added so much. It's a rondel, but what the expansion adds to Icky, and it was expansion here and all those things, it adds a shipyard and it adds other buildings. So it just adds more stuff. So I was really nervous. And some anytime you teach a game, you want it to be a good experience. Other people are paying a few dollars to get to play it. And I started to have a little bit of panic because some of my teaches go better than others, but I was like, I'm not prepared for this. And the 3 people that showed up couldn't have been kinder. They sat down. I don't know if they could read the panic on my face, but it's almost like unprepared teacher, but it looks like the teacher tries hard, so we'll just go with it. And we had a really good experience. We didn't get nearly all the rules correctly. That was on me, but I feel like I made new friends. You know what I mean? And I saw I was playing with a brother and a sister that I saw throughout the convention. Always said hello, hi, how you doing? And then another person who was just really, really kind. And so my takeaway with that, one, yes, awesome rondel, and it's the second rondel, and I love playing a good rondel. But the takeaway is it's also on the learner. Yes, the people teaching the games, we talk a lot about the teach, but what a difference it makes if you have kind people who are willing to kind of just go through that experience with you. So that was another highlight of the con for me.
Yeah, certainly somebody that sits down to the table. I don't know how to put that, but you're right. It is on the learner, not necessarily on the learner, but the personality and or the attitude of the people learning the game makes a huge difference, right?
Yeah, and a different day, if somebody just takes over a rule book and starts taking over the teach without saying anything, without permission, just let me see that. Here's how I think the game should be taught. That's an issue. I want to send it back to you, though, because, I was really happy to get Icky played and the expansion, and I was really happy to get Metro Runner played, but you got one off your list that you picked up at Gen Con that you were very excited about. Do you just want to mention how we started our day yesterday?
Yeah, well, and it wasn't one I picked up on Gen Con. We couldn't get it. I had to get it after the fact.
Had to wait like the rest of the humans, huh?
Yeah, and that is Rock Hard 1977, which had a bunch of buzz coming out of Gen Con, and it's a light hobby to hobby game, probably closer to hobby, with a theme that I was predisposed to like. I love music. I love a Euro hobby style game that has a lot of thematic and narrative elements, which this one does. And it was just phenomenal. And it was one that, maybe I shouldn't say this, maybe I should, but it's one that it was like a collection reevaluator, which is to say that this game for me was so good that it made me question games that are in my collection that don't make me feel that way of I want to play this, I am willing to play this anytime, anywhere.
Quoting Doug, this might be my favorite game of the year.
Yeah, I probably will. I can't imagine, maybe I'll play something else. And there have been a bunch of awesome games this year, but making me reevaluate of the games that are on my shelf and that I want to love them as much as I loved that experience.
What did you like about the game, Doug? And we know it's going to be a game of the week at some point, but just to our listeners who are listening on this journey with us, what made it so good for you?
I think, it's what makes it so good is the stuff that I talk about a lot, which is themes attached to mechanisms, where I felt like I'm doing all of the things that an aspiring musician would be doing. Is I'm trying to record demos and get a record contract and playing gigs and trying to, get band members and get noticed and make money and when those things all come together in a thematic way, not only does it make it easy to teach, but it also creates a secondary story while I'm playing the game. And those, for me, are the ones that I have the best memories of, is that I can leave a game like that, and it was so engaging, and so there's no oddball thing where it's like, oh, come over here and that's how you get $2. Like, okay, that's great. Or, there's no oddball actions that didn't seem like they fit. It's like, if you wanted $1, you went to the donate blood space. Like, that's the desperate type of thing, and they all made sense to the point where, whether it was a game like that or Scarface, when you can come away after and write your own little story of how your journey went, it's like, yep, I guess I lost my job that time, and this didn't work out, and, things work and don't work, and I was struggling for cash, and it worked out. Like, those little stories, like, I feel like I could write a small 2-page essay on your character after playing that game, and one for me as well. And that, to me, adds to that experience.
Yeah, it was an awesome game, and it was one that I think I have a handful of games where it's like, I want to play that every year. But now that list is big enough where I know I really hope to play that game every 18 months. Even to the point where I kind of have a Gamehole Con list of, on odd years, I want to play or teach this game. On even years, I will play or teach this game. And I think Rock Hard 1977 just fits into one of those games where I want to see what happens with repeated plays, not from a strategy perspective, but I want other folks to have that same experience that you had, and I want to have it with them.
Yeah.
When you have an awesome game, go ahead.
Yeah, with different they're different player characters, and there's so many. Instead of
what was yours? I should know. I was the drummer. I was an awesome drummer.
Was it Leo Love or something like that?
Were you a guitarist? Were you?
I was
goofball?
A bass player.
Bass player, yeah.
I was a bass player. But
who developed passive income way too early in the game, folks. That's
I got a record deal early.
How did you get royalties so early? Oh, I'm in trouble here.
But there's a space on the board called After Hours where you can go and hang out at different clubs, and it's just a perfect the little touches where, okay, you're flipping over a card and you're getting a bonus. It's like, it could just be that. It's like, you flip it over. All right, I got $2 in this. But there's always a story with it. There's a little narrative in there, and it's not. It adds to the game. It doesn't take away from the game, and it's not something at the bottom where you just like ignore it. It's like, all right, well, you can just read it if you want. This is one that forces you to read it because it's fun, because you want to do it, and it's one that you mentioned. Oh, this is a game I hope to play once a year. I think that was one of the things that made me think about my collection. And it's like, how can I reduce my collection down so I'm playing the games that I want to play once a year every 6 months instead of that, because my collection is smaller and I'm only holding on to the awesome, the best of the best for me. And get the games there that I could get to the table. I think when we were eating lunch or dinner one day, said, wouldn't it be weird to just pretend like the board game industry didn't exist for the next 3 years and not buy anything new? Just completely just shut off that spigot and be like, I'm just going to play what's in my house. Yeah. How different that would be.
Yeah, and sorry to jump in there, but we did have that conversation, and part of what leads to it, in the room where we sat and played games, there's a lot of that happening. There is a lot of Power Grid. There is a lot of Agricola. There is a lot of diplomacy. Not just being played once, being played over and over and over and over throughout the 4 days. So, that's that's a future School of Gaming segment, I think, Doug. I've got it in.
It was weird that there was a lack of hotness in the most refreshing possible way. Right? In the convention, you would have a better idea than I did, but because you were there longer. But from my vantage point, it was people sitting down and playing games that they liked and enjoying them, and not, all right, this is a new thing. We got to get this to the table, get this to the table. So that was refreshing.
And as a regional convention, not so much the hotness, but some of those newer titles or titles that we have been talking about over the last 6 or 8 months, or might be excited to get. You see the same people playing some of those titles in the same spaces as a year before, which to me is always somewhat endearing. Like, oh, Gamehole is where they meet up with a couple of their buddies, they make new buddies, and they're playing some of the games that they clearly aren't going to be able to get to on a game night or even a regular Saturday. Right? When you have a 3-hour game, even if you have a dedicated table space, a lot of people have other commitments and things they need to do. So
that's the Arnak zone. That's so cool. It was cool to see.
It was cool. Doug, I think this is a really appropriate time to introduce somebody who won't be joining us here actually in our studio, but who was just here 2 episodes ago, and that's special guest Dan Cunningham with his dad, who we refer to as Papa. Dan was on for Best Inserts, a special guest on episode 191. We played some games with Dan, and I don't know how we can talk about Gamehole Con without talking about Dan. And Papa watches us on YouTube, so I thought we might as well just bring both of them in right now. And I would love to just mention a game briefly, however you want to take it, wherever you want to take it. But I'm also fairly certain this is going to be a game of the week coming up, because it's another one. The first time you and I played it in Lucas Oil Stadium, we looked at each other and we said, this works. And that's Knar, Knarr, which I didn't know about, and I don't think you knew about until our Discord started chatting it up, right?
Yeah, and it's just a great little game that I think got lost in the shuffle. I know it's been popular because it's hard for people to keep it in stock, it seems like. At the same time, I don't hear a lot of the big content creators and reviewers and stuff talking about it that much either. So, which is kind of bizarre. So I don't know how that came out and kind of missed the zeitgeist, or maybe we missed the zeitgeist. But
we got a 4-player game in, and I love that game, man. That game works for so many different reasons. I love how the combos fire off. I don't know if we want to do a quick overview or just save that for another episod, but
we'll definitely be talking about it.
Yeah.
The kind of the pros is it's got fast turns and just one of those things, a really unique system that I kind of like, which is you're building up a system, but eventually you have to shut the system down. And when do you choose to do that? You're basically pivoting out of this engine that you've created in order to power up a different engine, but then you lose all of the abilities of that engine that you built. But you're not going to score points until you start, branching out and doing that. And I kind of love that push and pull of, oh, it's getting stronger. It's getting stronger. Oh, I can just play this card down and boom, 5 things are going to fire off. But then at a certain point, you're like, yeah, but I need to move those over here. And then you're starting back from square one again. And trying to manage that is a really cool system.
Well, and the law of diminishing returns kicks in. If you fire off what's in your hand one too many times, all of a sudden you're full and you didn't maximize, your purchasing power. So lots there. One that I think we'll be talking about again. I brought up Dan for 2 different reasons. I know Dan and I played a game of Kinfire Delve today, which was also in episode 191 as a spotlight, because we had exactly 37 minutes to get a game in. And I said, Dan, here's one that I can get up and running. We'll play the short version, take 14 of these, put them over here. I think I said 3 sentences to him, and we were up and playing. And sometimes when you have an MIT grad who's able to do pivot tables in their head for fun, you can get through a deck builder in an efficient manner and dig your way through the dungeon. So we had the fastest, and I would say most fun, not most fun, but we had a fast, fun time, and then he was gone, and I put it away, and I was like, this is a good little 2-player just for that right time. And I'm not sure that I need to continue to stockpile 2-player only games that can be played in a convention in 37 minutes or less when one person's never played it. But for me, that might be my go-to: 2 players or less, 37 minutes or less, and one player's never played it. And then I just want to juxtapose that with, we got a first look at Citizens of the Spark. It's on Kickstarter right now. I think it will still be on as of the time of this record, but as the time of this drop. Yeah. But Citizens of the Spark is another, it's the Thunderworks currently crowdfunded game, and we got to play a prototype with Jess Carrier, who works for Thunderworks and who's just an awesome human being, formerly of Noble Knight, and always been very good to us.
There are 2 days left.
There are 2 days left, folks. 2 days, and it's been funded. There's some extra goodies on there. The playmat is nice. I can tell you that. The stitching on the playmat and all that, if you're a playmat person. Go ahead. You were going to say something?
A late pledge.
I'm
assuming that the late pledge will be live while you hear this episode.
Yeah, well, and it will go to retail too. They put their stuff in retail, so don't worry about. I'm not trying to get people to run and hype and get your feelings hurt, but there's a lot of deck builders out there. This one is not set in Ulos, so for our Thunderworks heads, and not a deck builder, but I'd say it's a deck builder.
No, it's a tableau builder. Deck builder has a very different connotation.
No, you're right. Yeah. Tableau builder. And one in which you get to choose which character you're going to score, and then others may follow. So if I put up my my executioner and take out a couple cards, if Doug has an executioner, he could also follow with it. And then the more executioners you have, it might make it slightly buffed up, this or that. But my point with this, I thought I was doing good, Doug. I had like an 8-point turn. I had a 12-point turn. And then our friend,
and me both, Michael,
sitting across from me, who had previously played an earlier prototype, who may have been a championship Magic the Gathering player, dropped a 64-point turn and took out some of my cards. Yeah. I was like, what is going on here?
I think in that turn he got more turns or more points I got in the entire game. Yeah. I don't know if we kept track of the scores, but
I did. Do you want to know them on air here live?
Yes. Embarrass me on live.
Yes, in first place but I told you there'd be some turning people. So I'll go from fourth. I had 54 points, and I know 2 people had bigger turns than that.
Yes, they did.
Jess and Dan both had bigger turns. You had a respectable 86. Nobody had a single 86-point turn.
No, close though.
Okay,
Felt that way.
Jess had 110, and that's a great marketer. That's somebody you want leading your company, because they flex. They're like, yeah, I know what I'm doing, but I let you get the win, and she let Dan get the win with 145.
Yeah.
So,
seems about
but the
right.
cool thing about that one, if you really like a lot of variability in your games, there's a billion different combos in that. So it was cool to get a sneak peek at that.
Yeah,
have those Dan experiences, getting crushed and then crushing in a co-op.
Now, I don't know if you have this on your list, but the other thing I thought that you were bringing up Dan for is we got to play a giant version, or I shouldn't say giant. It was a oversized version of Guild of Merchant Explorers.
I had that on my list for con highlights. Let's go into it now. Yeah.
In which Dan created a board with AEG's permission to make a oversized magnetized board that basically, for those of you that don't know, Guild of Merchant Explorers, you are building routes with cubes as the game goes along. And then at the end of the round, some pieces stay on the board and the rest of them come off, and you can then branch out from the pieces that stay on the board. And in the actual game, you just slide all your pieces off, or you basically have to pick up one by one all of the pieces that need to get taken off. In this version, the pieces that stay are magnetized, and you just tip your board over, and all the other stuff falls off, and you're ready to go. It was
awesome.
Awesome, yeah.
Yeah. And, this was nominated for a Spiel for 2023. So when they were just announced this past summer, Matthew Dunstan, Brent J. Gilbert, it is a phenomenal game. It's one that a year or 2 ago I played a bunch solo, really enjoyed, played through all the maps and got the expansion maps, and I love that game. And to be able to play that with the magnets, with, my buddies, Doug and Dan and his dad. And it was a really enjoyable experience. That was fun.
Yeah. Yep.
Man, that was close too. That was close. First, second, and third were there was 5 points between us. It was close, because all three of us knew that game, and so we were in it. We were competing. So putting an asterisk on there, I might give you and me the win for that over Dan. There's a lot to go to. I had one other con surprise. It was like I had no idea I was going to have, and this is under the category of fun. And then I do have a con surprise, and this is on a category of curious, and that one I haven't talked to you about, but fun. Link City, Doug. You got that out. We had a fail yesterday, folks. I tried to get Video Game Champion up and running, and I just didn't have the brain power to do it. I had taught 14 hours of games in the 2 previous days, and I wasn't fresh enough on the rules, and there were a lot of little bits. And I was frustrated. I was feeling dejected because I wanted to get that going. And as I'm putting it away, Doug's like, "Here, let's try this." And we played Link City. And I
gotta applaud you for that, because I think that is the correct choice, but it's the hard choice. And I've found myself in that situation too, where you're like, I vaguely know the rules, and I've read the rules a bunch of times. It's usually happens one of those things where it's like you finish a game early and people start looking at the shelf, and somebody says, "Hey, why don't we play that?" And you're like, "Yeah, let's." And then you start picking it up and you're like, I really should get a refresher. This is not going to be a great experience as if I were fully prepared. And I think it's hard, and I think sometimes powering through that actually makes it worse. And when we talk about the number of variables that can kind of go into a gameplay experience, whether it's the people at the table, the time of day, if people are hungry and things like that, I think that's one thing that can have just a recipe for disaster of just pushing it through, and you play a rule wrong, and then the guy, the person that teaches it feels bad because they screwed something up. And then the other people are like, I don't even know if I played the game right or if this was a good experience to judge. So it's not an easy thing to do that, but I think it's usually the right thing to do. So don't beat yourself up over that by any means.
No, thank you. I glad you said all that. It's and I also want to give the game and the gamers a fair shot, right? I don't want to push somebody else into that, and then that forever can taint your view of a game. So. But let's talk about the game that, while I was getting all those little bits and buttons and cassettes put away, that we got out and played. Let's talk about Link City. Just highlight how awesome that was, and I really can't believe you didn't put the public restroom next to the board game cafe, especially with where we were. But I'll send it over to you.
Should have made sense. Well, or the soap factory. But anyway, Link City is a game that I sought out and picked up at Gen Con, and it's what essentially would be a party game in most circumstances, but I thought, you know what, this would just be fun to try, Michael and I. And you know what, it worked just as well with 2 players as I can imagine it would work in a group of 5 or 6 where people are debating. And essentially what happens is one person takes a turn of being the mayor. They get 3 to 4 different building tiles, and then they put those behind a screen. The other players have no idea what building tiles are behind there, but they put little cones next to other areas of the city, and that's where the mayor needs to determine which building is going next to which cone in the city, and then makes their prediction, lifts up their screen, and now all of the other players need to see if they can determine, after seeing what the building types are, where they would put them or where they think the mayor put them. And talk about a game with a small footprint, a lot in the box, a lot of variety, but still a game that you and I were able to create our own little universe and narrative in that with just 2 people. And that is really remarkable to me.
And with the 2-sided tiles, if you're playing with a kid and if they get one that they might not know what it is, you can flip it over, and then there's something very basic, more basic or elementary on the other side. And not that one is more advanced than the other, but I really like what they did with that. So nobody has to explain anything. I think if you're 8 or 9 or 10, you can get that. As long as you can read a sight word, you can get that going. I think that one's going to be a huge hit for us, and one that we'll talk a lot about over the next several years. And the other thing that made me think halfway through is like, man, the power of a recommendation. Because we were at Gen Con, and I was hemming and hawing on it. It had a lot of buzz going into it, and you were hot on that one. And then Chris Leader from Calliope Games, who we had interviewed previously on our show, just hollered from across the way, and he said, "That's a great game. We played it. We played it a bunch last night. That's a great game." And so already I was, thinking back to what he said, is like, yeah, this is another one that just works. And it's with all the games that we were talking about, with taking a 3-year break. Imagine if you took a 3-year break and you came back and then you revisited the great ones like that. It's still nice to see that those are being taught. Similar vibe to the first time I played Just One, or first time I played one of those games. It's like, this is gonna work.
Yeah, and it's one that it's interesting when a game like Just One comes out, and then there's a bunch of games that take some ideas from it or some like kind of party game tropes, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Yeah. And it's really neat to see the ones where it's like, oh yeah, they've found the right combination, the right different combination. And sometimes, companies come out with a game and it's like, oh, I see what they're trying to do here, but in practice maybe just doesn't work out as well. And this one does.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And then I mentioned a little teaser earlier on. In the middle of the first game that I was playing on Thursday, I won't go game by game everything, but it was a 5-hour one. It was a big, long one, right? Somebody came into the room on a Thursday morning, into this room where a bunch of Euro games are being played, and was like beaming as if they had just become a father for the first time, just like glowing. And they ran over and they talked to, I'm assuming it was their dad, but I didn't get a good look. It might have been an older brother, but it was definitely a family member, kind of sat down right in their personal space and said, "I loved it." And so now I'm listening like, whoa, what? They just got done playing Blood on the Clock Tower. And that is a darker, more gothic, I would say almost horror version of Mafia or Werewolf, but one that is very refined, that I've been hearing, a lot about for a long time. But to actually see people have that experience throughout Thursday and Friday at Gen Con, and I didn't talk to you about this. I meant to, I just didn't get to it. Yeah. But then I had that happen later on Thursday at my table. Somebody was late coming to the game, and they were like huffing and puffing. So glad you didn't start. Blood on the Clock Tower went a little long, but I couldn't leave. And they went right into what happened as if I was familiar with it and just got done playing myself. But you could tell with their excitement. I was like, ooh, that's a game I need to check out. And the 15-year-old that lived with my eldest child, she's also brought up that her D&D group has mentioned it before, and I know Noble Knight has a group that plays like twice a month. So that's one that it's not so directly tied to the Game Schooler podcast, but one that I'm curious about. I'm getting more into deduction and social deduction and the theater of it, and I want to just trace that back to, I got a negotiation game played. That was a ton of fun. And then this is where I'll wrap up and send it to you. I played Zuvadis, Reiner Knizia, making your way through the zoo, and folks, it did not disappoint. Played it with 6 people. One of them actually happens to be Dan, aforementioned, in our game group, who signed up and didn't actually know that he signed up for the game. He told me, he's like, I'm playing the game Zuvadis. It's like, yep, I'm going to be teaching that one, Dan. So it was fun to play a game that I've been wanting my family to play, but sometimes it just doesn't fit. Right? Yeah. A cutthroat game where you're negotiating your way through the zoo, and it's based on a game 1991 called Quo Vadis, Rise and Let Us Be on Our Way, or Where Are You Going, depending on how you want to translate it, where you're making your way through the Senate, and really, really mean trades. Like, hey, I'll give you $2, 2 laurels here, laurels, points, dollars, all the same thing. You let me go here, and then I'll help you out in the future. But only the thing that happens in that moment is binding. So somebody might give the 2, but then they might not fulfill the future promise. And not everybody is even eligible to win. Like the good Dr. Reiner Knizia, you better make it all the way to the end of the zoo or you're not eligible to win. And then you have 2 abilities. But the good doctor doesn't allow you to use your abilities. Your abilities are used by other people, and you get some points for it. So it was just this wonderful blend, and it all came together, and people were using animal voices as if playing Dinosaur Tea Party, but in a much louder, crowded room. So that was awesome. And then I got Yellen Yanksy played as well, and that was also awesome. So it's just fun to get that shelf of Reiner behind me to get them out, get them played, and see other people happy to play them. I think that's something that I'll always do at that convention.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
So sorry for the rant. Don't know how I got to Zuvadis from Blood on the Clock Tower, other than there's always things to be curious about. You know what I mean? Like going in on Thursday, I had no idea that I'd be curious about that. But when I saw people's genuine reactions, it was like, whoa, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I guess the overarching experience for me, if I'm summarizing or wrapping it up, is it's nice to, we talk about this a lot on the show, so this is not going to be surprising to some people, but I am surprised when you get away from the machine of the hobby and the industry, the general joy and excitement that you see people having on a smaller scale in some of these regional conventions, and the pomp, circumstance, and show isn't there, and sometimes I think that's good. It works, and it's nice to see that general excitement from different people. Of you're playing a game in one table, and you hear people hooting and hollering at the other based on something that happened, and you kind of hear people having a good time, and you hear some of that excitement, and you can go up to a booth like Thunderworks and talk to Keith or the other people there and hear each other.
Yep.
And it's like you kind of take that for granted of, all right, I don't have to wait in line for this. I don't have to jockey for a bathroom stall. I don't have to, all those kind of little things that is what makes it kind of special to me. I know you get I'm kind of out of it because last year, the first year we went, I was there for almost every day. Think I may have actually been there more than you were. And then last year I had a commitment for my daughter, so I couldn't go. And this year I was waiting to see if I had that same commitment again, that I wouldn't be able to sign up. And so I signed up late and didn't get to sign up for a lot of games to play or anything like that. It was kind of just like, hope I can get in there for some time. But I love that you're able to get in there and do some of those games that's like, I'm not going to play. And I know you love them, which is so cool to see you go there and then be like, yeah, I played this game, and it's a 5-hour game, and we got halfway through it, and everybody there had played there, and everybody had a blast. Like, that's so cool to hear.
Yeah, and I just have 2 more on that. One thing I think Gamehole Con does a fantastic job of is their ticketing system. You can sign up for games. It's kind of a rule of 2 feet. You can sign up for games. It's really easy. You put it in your cart, you check out. But if something comes up, let's say 5 years from now I run into Doug and we hadn't seen each other in a long time, I can just return that game and money's credited to my account. So as somebody who GM'd, a bunch of games on Thursday, Friday, I was seeing things come in and out, turn over, in and out, in and out. But then for this morning, when I was looking, it's like, oh my goodness, there's a 1:00 game of Cuba Libre. I've always wanted to try a coin game. That's kind of what Root is based on. I've never actually really played a real war game, putting air quotes on, but we're in an area of the United States where there are a lot of them played because of Noble Knight and others, and just the lineage, and sat down and played a 4-hour game, and it cost $2, and I've got new friends, and the guy who taught it, you could tell that he had probably, I'm guessing, put 40, I don't know how many hours into getting ready for today. Like, this was his event, and he did a great job teaching it. And you could tell he was so excited to get to share this game, his personal copy, with other people, and to just get to sit there and soak it up and to play with other people. It was awesome. And then the my wrap up moment, we're pretty fortunate with what we get to do, Doug, like getting to play games as a hobby, and talk about it. And we had a gift pack that was sent to us, and it was just completely out of the blue, but came all the way from the UK. And one of the games that I got was Zuuli, Zuuli, and Nicole had sent that to us, somebody who's on our Discord and been very long time listener back in the days before video, when the way to get a hold of us was just through email and only email. We had no presence anywhere else. We would hear from Nicole, and there was a lot of School of Gaming episodes that were generated off of folks like Nicole and Mike and other people who would email, right? Stefan. And I don't mean to leave people out. I'm just going off the top of my head, but we got to play that last night, and I could see right away, like, ooh, Doug's came out early. I'm in some trouble, but it was nice to play that with you, and kind of just, you see those games that come and go, but then there's other ones where it's like, this is in my quiver for a reason. And if it's me and my personality, and so that was fun. That was a lot of fun playing that. And for the record, Doug had 127 points.
What'd you have, Michael?
61.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I couldn't get the enclosures out, Doug.
Michael let me win. Put it that way.
I don't think so, but we'll play again so that we can get it somewhere.
Round, I think maybe the first round, Michael thought he was going to let me win, and then he's like, "Oh, he's got the hang of this," and then tried to turn on the afterburners. No,
we'll play again, because I think it could be a spotlight game. But those enclosures, man, if you don't get the enclosures, that game is brutal. Like, that's where I've had tears, and they're not mine, but they're my 9-year-olds. Like, why'd you take that one, Dad? It can get tough at 2 and 3. So. But my only point with that is lots of different kinds of games. I mean, you're going from war games to 15-minute party games to draft and pass family games to games with rondels to expansion games with rondels with a variable marketplace. There's so many awesome games out there, and that I think that's what's awesome with going to a convention. You get to try a lot of them and see the people. We're not even name dropping. We're name dropping the people that we know, but there are big time designers there. Yeah, and we had a post that went out on Saturday morning, and I saw the guy that had just posted about it. I was like, oh, that's, but that was it's a small hobby,
Yeah.
So
and a great opportunity to try games and maybe say, all right, I don't need that in my collection, or I do need that in my collection.
Got some of those in here as well.
I'm happy to got it. I'm happy I got to play it. I like it. I don't need it. I'd be happy to play it again. Like, all of that, a little bit of market research is another great plus out of those type of conventions, playing conventions. All right, well, that is going to do it for us this week. A little bit of a special episode next week. We will be back on our normal schedule with our normal format. So thank you so much for spending the last hour or so with us. We truly appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.